Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's that time again. Another freshly squeezed. This one, I've been wanting to do this one. Haven't really had a chance previously to do it, and I am so excited to take you along for the ride. So, let's go ahead and step into to freshly squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. Welcome back. Okay, so it's about that time again. Let's do it right here.
But really, nothing compares with a freshly squeezed.
I love that drop. I love that.
It is perfect.
It is fantastic, right? George, I am so glad to have you on with me. I haven't been able to do a freshly squeezed with just you, so this is a really kind of a special thing. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, glad to be on, talking some juicy Disney info with you. And yeah, this is really cool. You know, we're in the OG 55 studio tonight, and it's going to be a great topic, so I can't wait.
Oh man, I'm excited about it myself. So, why don't you tell the fine folks at home where they can find you?
Absolutely. You can find me on YouTube under DisneyFamilyMan23, on Twitter at Disney George, and of course, you can find me on Orange Grove 55's channel with Citrus Corner.
Great. That's wonderful. It's wonderful. Oh, you know what? I forgot to chime you in. I do apologize. There you go.
There we go.
A little bit of a bird chirp right there. And we'll get you sent into the park. So, on this episode of Freshly Squeezed, I wanted to bring this topic up that's quite interesting. A lot of people are talking about the New Orleans Square redo. And you know what? For good reason. As Disneyland fans, as fans of this very unique park, a lot of people consider New Orleans Square to be not just one of the best lands in the park, but one of the best lands ever conceived and constructed. You know, I mean, it was kind of one of Walt's last lands that he got to contribute to Disneyland. I mean, obviously he was working on the Tomorrowland renovation, but New Orleans Square, I think he was really proud of, and obviously his work on Pirates of the Caribbean and so forth. I mean, this was a really, really big thing for him, and so it's these attractions are kind of intertwined with the history of this land, and we added Fantasmic to this land, and it's. As it kind of grew out, with Bear Country, Critter Country, and so forth, and Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. This kind of area of the park is really it's almost kind of sacred hollow ground for the fan community. And we're seeing all these kind of walls everywhere. I mean, Tarzan's Treehouse is covered with, construction walls, scrims, scaffolding. We're now getting the bridge that goes over kind of Pirates of the Caribbean. Where the trees that were back there are gone, right? Those two amazing fig trees that used to offer so much shade for guests waiting for Pirates of the Caribbean are now missing. We're having the walls over there by the Fantasmic viewing area that used to have those kind of tier platforms, and those are walled off, and a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are kind of anxious because this land is so kind of sacred. It's kind of like the heart of Disneyland almost in a kind of a certain way. George, what do you kind of feel about this? How do you feel about all these changes, all these kind of construction walls inhabiting this land right now?
Well, first off, I have to say I completely 100% agree with you with it being a sacred land in Disneyland, because it was never made before after Disneyland. Like, it's only in that park. It's so embedded in the rich history, and as you said, it has Walt's handprints all over it, and it's one of those lands that, and this is a little bit of the disappointment within Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World that I have, that Disneyland has. Disneyland is like a tapestry of moving within the scenes. So as you move through New Orleans Square, you can kind of set yourself back into the corners of the land, and you immerse yourself within basically being in New Orleans. And you have all the exotic detail and in the buildings, the structures, and even the cast members, the atmosphere. Exactly. Where with Walt Disney World, it's more so you're just kind of like walking through these set pieces that it's less seamless than what Disneyland has, because especially when you're excuse me, at the cafe outside.
Cafe Orleans.
Yes, when you sit on those tables and you get the full, almost like the 360 degree of the atmosphere that you're in, where you have literally Frontierland to the right of you. You look left beyond, you would see Critter Country, and it's like all the surroundings are in with this one land, and it's my favorite part of the park. It's my favorite land.
Oh, and I'm right there with you. I have a lot of fond memories of sitting at Cafe Orleans, and one in particular, my mother and I actually went down there for the opening of Submarine Voyage. We were just kind of like spontaneous visit, like, hey, let's just go to Disneyland for a day, and see the opening of Submarine Voyage, and while we were there, talking about what we had just seen, we got a reservation at Cafe Orleans, and we're just sitting down there, and we're just admiring just the beauty of everything. Coming from Arizona just a couple hours before, and it was just like, wow, this is amazing. This is primo Disneyland, and that memory is pretty great. I still think about it today. It's just if you never experienced it, folks.
Yes, you can try to explain it in detail, but unless you actually experience it yourself, there's no comparison.
Oh yeah,
and it's like,
absolutely.
Even after I finished my Monte Cristo sandwich, I'm like sitting there for like a good 45 minutes, where I could be riding a ride or doing something, but no, I just had to sit there and just absorb in the ambiance of like what that land has to offer, and it's breathtaking. And as you mentioned too, with Fantasmic, again, it's one of those things that's part of the land. It comes alive at night, where you're not necessarily you're walking to an amphitheater to sit down and say, oh, I'm preparing myself to see a show. The show is part of the land. And you couldn't get that anywhere else but Disneyland, I feel. And I can't really speak for the international parks, but as far as like the domestic parks,
well, no, I mean, it's interesting. Originally you had mentioned that Disney never did that land again, and in almost every single instance they didn't, except for Tokyo. Tokyo does have a version of New Orleans Square, but even Tokyo's is not quite the same mix. It doesn't have that quite that World of Color, I'm sorry, not World of Color, but Rivers of America atmosphere, right? It doesn't have like, Splash Mountain and Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, juxtaposed in the certain orientation that it's in, that brings that unique atmosphere. It doesn't have like a Columbia and a Mark Twain going through the river. It doesn't come alive at night with Fantasmic, like you mentioned. Like, that's one of the greatest things about that area, is that it all kind of looks just like it's supposed to be, right? It's all kind of in theme, and then this show magically appears, utilizing sets and set pieces that you've been just walking past and didn't even think about. I mean, it really is quite amazing.
And I think it's kind of ironic that we actually had a little bit of this kind of conversation when we were out there and we were standing in New Orleans Square, you, me, OG, and of course our very special, good mutual friend. That we were having a conversation, and it's almost like that when they built Walt Disney World, they kind of took it almost for granted of having all that space, where yes, they do have the blessing of size, but it's like they stayed a little bit too comfortable to say, oh, we got all this land, let's just throw this together. Where with Disneyland, you kind of have to be on your toes, because you only have so much land to make something. So it's like, let's make something worthwhile.
Right. And because of its long history, a little bit longer history than Walt Disney World, and because it's really been the only park for most of its life, right? A lot of these areas get worked over and over again. Stuff is added, stuff is, rehab, stuff is changed, stuff is altered. And in the case of New Orleans Square, though that amphitheater that a pseudo amphitheater, as you astutely pointed out, that provides that waiting area or that viewing area for Fantasmic, was added over time in order to facilitate that show. Tony Baxter kind of had in his mind, and a couple of Imagineers, hey, how can we facilitate this viewing area this viewing for the show even better, increase the capacity, but also make it kind of, pleasing to the eye. A lot of those kind of things were added. The bridge over Pirates of the Caribbean, for example, and that kind of carve out right there. That was all added for Fantasmic, and it kind of adds to the beauty of that area. But now we have a bunch of walls everywhere, and things are changing.
So yeah, sorry. So I kind of went off a little bit there, but to answer your question, to answer your original question is, I think with New Orleans Square, again, having that sacred feel of the park, I feel that it kind of caught me by surprise, because a lot of times Disney likes to extend their notion of when something is going to go down for refurbishment or get fixed up or what have you. This one kind of caught me by surprise, and I think caught a lot of people by surprise. And I think that's why the community is having such an uproar reaction, because for people, because we both know how the reservation system is at Disneyland right now, how the tickets are right now with the magic keys. It's so anyone that could have the privilege of finally getting a reservation for the park on a day that they could actually go, and then you go and you see scaffolding and walls up, and it's now Pirates is down for a long refurbishment. That one, and for the 50th anniversary too, I get, they have to spruce everything up. I get that, there's going to be a time where it's going to disappoint somebody, but I think it was the amount of time, such short amount of time, that Disney had said, oh yeah, by the way, we're closing down like 3/4 of New Orleans Square. And it's like, here it is.
Yeah, I know. It was a shock to the system. I got to be honest with folks. I have never seen. I've been covering the parks for 15 years. Okay, I've been doing this for a long time. All right. Like I was telling George I believe it was on George on a pre-stream or in some other context, that I've been to media events. I've been to I've been to events that the park has held. I've seen so many people. I've met with so many people, and in that time period of really immersing myself into kind of Disneyland and how the operation, how it works, I have never seen this many refurbishments going on simultaneously in this park. I just have never seen it before. I mean, this really kind of took me back and took me by surprise. We saw for a little bit period of time, parts of Main Street that were completely covered up and scaffolded. We saw Indiana Jones, down for a few days, and then that was right after Splash Mountain was down for its annual refurbishment. Was Big Thunder down?
Big Thunder was before Splash.
Wow. Yeah, I mean it's we're getting these kind of rehabs all over the place. Finding Nemo Submarine Voyage is still down. Tarzan's Treehouse is still down. It was a lot. It was a lot to take in, and there was a while there where if you went to the park, you were going to have a wall pretty much in every single land. Toontown completely denied to you, right? For example. So this was quite a bit. But getting back to New Orleans Square, I think you're right, George. I think it took even park operators by surprise a little bit that Pirates of the Caribbean would have to go down in the way it did. That it would have to go down maybe sooner than they expected in order to get ready for some of the Fantasmic offerings, right? Kind of all these things had to go in and get kind of in order before Fantasmic, goes live. And to make that timeline work, I think they were taken aback and were like forced to make some rapid paced decisions.
Because they made a last-minute decision, correct me if I'm wrong, that they announced that it was going to be on March 28th, that there's going to be a type of meeting with a lot of announcements, especially now I know this is for Walt Disney World, but they said that there was going to be like a lot of, for Guardians of the Galaxy and Fantasmic returning to Hollywood Studios. They said they're going to have a lot. And I think that they announced that on WDW News today. And it makes me wonder if they're going to have any information on Disneyland during that meeting.
I mean, it's a possibility. It's a possibility. I mean, we're seeing the company take these kind of little opportunities to make these kind of spontaneous announcements and these kind of I mean, for example, like Toontown, right? That wasn't announced at any Disney event. It was announced at IAPA, wasn't it?
That was yes.
By Yoshimura.
They didn't even wait for Destination D23 when
No,
that's when usually they would announce it. They actually, and that was the weird thing. They announced that weeks before the event. You
right.
know, to everyone to build up anticipation on making such an announcement at a D23 event, and then announce something like out of the clear blue that no one even knew that was going to come about.
That one was surprising, but we're seeing these kind of crazy announcements, these kind of, as the company plays catch up with their previous refurbishment calendars or maybe something, stuff that they have on the agenda. They're taking these kind of opportunities to roll out announcements in these kind of other venues and places that you wouldn't really expect. But I wanted to bring this up to the viewers because I think this is maybe indicative of maybe the kind of the company philosophy right now and how it's kind of changed from previous years. George, could you be so kind as to put this image on the screen?
Absolutely.
Now, for our viewers who might not know what they're looking at, this is Blue Bayou right now. As you can see, there's something missing as part of the atmosphere ambiance of the Blue Bayou experience. George, do you know what's missing from this picture? I think.
I mean, it's a wild guess, but I think it would be that breathtaking scenery of the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction itself, that you get that immersive of the ride without actually being on the ride while you're either having lunch or dinner at this very unique style restaurant. I mean, you get these nice big blue construction walls.
And look, I mean, I don't frequent the park as much as I'd like, obviously, but I do frequent it occasionally. And maybe I'm jaded, but do you think that the views of that amazing indoor bayou swamp that is part of the introduction to Pirates of the Caribbean and is a feature of this restaurant? Do you think that's a big thing about this restaurant? Do you think that's plays a part in your experience?
I will say this. I don't really think that this restaurant is very popular just for the lanterns hanging above the tree.
You don't think so, huh? We're having fun, folks, but
yes.
This is a huge thing.
Yeah, in all seriousness, I mean, we had talked a little bit about before recording, but I feel that, with people already kind of knowing now, if they want to have a reservation. I'm not even going to say make a reservation. You can't make reservations at Disney anymore, folks. This is like Hunger Games. No pun intended. It's like you got to literally fight for your life to get these reservations because they go the second that they go onto the website. And for anyone that can have the opportunity to get a reservation,
huge deal.
It's you're excited, you're anticipated that I mean, look at that. I mean, that's just
What George is referring to, though, is I was trying to make a reservation for Blue Bayou for all of us when we actually came to this restaurant, right? And when we did, oh my goodness, I had to make it 6 days in advance. I had to actually look up when these things went live. I was going on forums and trying to figure out, like, okay, when do reservations go live? And nobody had a definitive answer. Apparently, it's like 4:00 PST ish. It's like sometimes it goes live at 3:53. Sometimes it goes live at 4:01 or whatever. You just kind of never know. So I had to stay up past midnight in order to catch these things go live. You get your reservation. Oh, fine. The Disney gods have graced you with a reservation for the illustrious Blue Bayou.
And this is what you get when you walk in.
And this is what you get when you walk in. And you weren't notified about this beforehand.
Exactly. That is the problem. For the people that already had made prior reservations 60 days out from when they had to go, and they just suddenly said, oh, yeah, by the way, we're doing this huge major refurb for New Orleans Square, and that's including Pirates of the Caribbean, the center main attraction of the land. Oh, yeah, and by the way, we're going to keep the restaurant open. Oh, applaud for that. But we're going to have, of course, these walls up after the fact these people had made these reservations. That is the frustrating part. Now, if you're making a reservation now, you automatically would know that, okay, something, but even to then, there's still no disclaimer that even though that the restaurant is open, they don't say that they have anything blocked off.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, there's been no disclosure about this. There's been, from what I understand, there's been no advanced communication about this. Previously, when something like this happened, I mean, listen, if something like this were to happen where they would have to take down Pirates of the Caribbean maybe before they previously wanted to, and they had reservations in the queue, they would either cancel those reservations and say, hey, look, we're going to have the restaurant closed, we can't, this is bad show, this is unacceptable, we can't have this happen. Or maybe they would offer a discount, or maybe they would email people in advance or call people in advance and kind of tell people, hey, look, this might impact your reservation, this might impact your experience, do you want to make a reservation for another restaurant on your day or something like that. They would accommodate you. And here we're not seeing that. And this is doubly bad because, remember, they've instituted the policy where you can't cancel, I think it's like 48 hours in advance or 24 hours in advance, something like that.
Yeah, it has to be before the actual day itself of your reservation. And here's the thing, at least we had, because when we had lunch there, you can't help but look out onto that area and see that attraction. Just even if the boats weren't moving, just even having the sound, the audio, the look of it, it's breathtaking. And then after the fact that I was done with lunch, I had to go over and snap some photos.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you just have to. Now,
as is customary.
I don't mean to knock it, but I have to mention it because this was also part of my dining review that was on my channel, DisneyFamilyMan23. And there were certain things with the food that I did enjoy. The gumbo was, I had to have 2 cups of that. That was just phenomenal. Yeah. The chicken you had was phenomenal. The alcoholic beverage, I had to have 2. I mean, a family man has to, kick back sometime as well. But the signature that is part of this restaurant, the Monte Cristo sandwich.
Yes.
There was just something not right about it. And our mutual friend kind of called it out that it seemed like it was kind of pre-frozen, pre-packaged. And that was later confirmed that because they had to cut down on budgets and everything, they had to have them already pre-made. So you kind of already have a little bit of that disappointment with the staple that makes Blue Bayou. And then on top of not having the signature view, I mean, is the money and the reservation even worth it right now?
Well, no. I mean, look, and this is what I was going to bring up too. This goes into my kind of overall theme, which is kind of declining standards, really. It's a micro and a macro. Macro, obviously, we're seeing this, and we're seeing no accommodation take place. But micro, I mean, look, you got the Monte Cristo. I mean, that is a famous sandwich, renowned, in theme park lore, essentially, as being part of this restaurant, being part of this experience. And when you had it, like you said, it was frozen, and our mutual, like you said, our mutual friend was going into like, oh yeah, they would do it like this, they would do it like, they would kind of hand dip it and stuff like that, and he was explaining the process, and it was so intricate, so amazing. But to get it to get that information that it was frozen, it just sent shockwaves to the table because we couldn't believe that they would actually do this.
They really need to let it go.
Oh yeah. I need that drop, by the way. I agree. But even if it was fresh, and it's not, but even if it was fresh, you're still paying a premium to order this dish at this specific location and to enjoy this ambiance.
And it was only for New Orleans Square, whether you got it at Cafe Orleans or the Blue Bayou. Correct. Now you can get them at certain areas. I think like couple pop-up areas around the Disneyland Resort, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that's where it kind of takes away, it kind of gives you that bitter pill taste, because this was supposed to be something specifically for this land. And now you can get them anywhere. Why? Oh, because they're prepackaged, pre-frozen. You heat them up, you serve them to guests.
I think that's why they went in that direction. So the Monte Cristo sandwich was actually brought out as part of Taste of Disney. Do you remember that? That kind of, or Touch of Disney, I should say.
Touch of Disney.
Right. That was part of the California Venture kind of pre-opening before the park was, it could officially open as part of the guideline changes and so forth. So you had them put in at Smoked Upper's Grill, and from what I understand, they're still there. But think about it, you can't have a Smoked Upper's Grill type restaurant facility do New Orleans Square signature Monte Cristos the way they've always done them. It just wouldn't work in that capacity. And I think once they kind of saw the demand and everything there, they were like, oh, let's just cut this. Let's just do it like this. And that way we don't have to do it the old handmade way, and we can save on costs. We can save on, on materials preparation for the day and so forth. We can save on all that and just have a frozen product, right? And then we saw Cafe Orleans where they actually half the portion sizes. Yeah. I think they cut them down a little bit at Blue Bayou, but it was really prominent in Cafe Orleans. Yeah. Like they halved them, and it was like, but the price stayed the same. And for Blue Bayou, you're paying for the ambiance, really. You're paying the premium for the ambiance, and they're not cutting that from the price when you actually go here and see these walls. So that's not happening.
But that was my initial reaction when they brought it out to me. I'm looking at it. I'm like, where's the rest of my sandwich? It's like, you would think I would see that over. That should be something over at the Pim Kitchen, because that thing was like microscopic compared to what the actual sandwich is. I mean, there were times where it's like you couldn't even open up your mouth wide enough to get that sandwich in. Yeah. It was a solid sandwich.
It was a solid sandwich, and I guess the thing I wanted to bring up was, something like this would have been unthinkable. I remember it wasn't that long ago either. Like, it was, I remember hearing about this maybe like a year or two before the events of 2020, where, the Imagineers were thinking about going into the Mexico Pavilion in Epcot and World Showcase, right? And redoing the Grand Fiesta Tour in the theme of Coco. And the restaurant tours is part of the restaurant that butts up against that attraction in a similar way that it does here in Blue Bayou. We're like, no, we're not going to take a loss of business as part of your redo, right? And eventually it just didn't happen, because it was like, we can't have a restaurant like this open and not take advantage of these views. And it just wouldn't be right to our guests, and we'd lose demand and so forth. But Disney is now doing this kind of stuff, and almost with impunity. And it really is a change in philosophy. It's a change in mentality over a very short time frame.
Yeah, it's very sad, because as you had mentioned with the Mexico Pavilion, because essentially that whole pavilion would have to be shut down due to the operational day-to-day of how it functions between the attraction itself, the restaurant, and there's also like an indoor marketplace that's supposed to look like as if you are outside in a Mexican village at night. So you have those three separate sections, but yet it's all combined into one pavilion. So you change one little thing, it hiccups the whole operation, and I would think that if they ever did consider doing something like that, that's the one smart thing that Walt Disney World did, as far as because of like with the operational system that we had mentioned, that if they did make a new pavilion, which I think we're all pretty much on board that it would be Encanto, there's no doubt in my mind that it would, they would need something to kind of fill in that gap so they could shut down those operations if they wanted to make those changes. But the thing with Blue Bayou is they already have the main center attraction shut down. So there's nothing that can take the place of it. It's you have this this wall that's completely just obliterating your viewpoint of the attraction.
Yeah, and this is kind of I will admit this is kind of a unique circumstance, right? Usually refurbishments are figured out months and months and months in advance, right? And to kind of figure out logistics, if you have kind of a conflict like this, you can hit it early. And I think this goes along with what we were saying earlier, where Pirates of the Caribbean went down maybe earlier than maybe they had originally anticipated and originally wanted. Maybe I don't quite know what the story is there. I'm still trying to get to the root of it, because I think you're right, George.
Especially for the 55th anniversary. Like, that to me is very odd that you would want to shut it down. I mean, I understand, things break down, things change. You have to keep up with it. And I applaud Disney at least for that, because they want to keep up with these attractions. But right for the anniversary, that strikes me kind of odd. It makes me wonder if there's something going on internally that they don't really want to put the main focus on for the guests, and they're just like, okay, let's just do an immediate shutdown and let's take care of that issue.
Right. I was just I love how you brought it up, because I was just going to mention that as part of this kind of attraction and this redo, from what I understand, before it went down, it was having some operational challenges. It was having some mechanical I wouldn't say failures, but they were having some hiccups. I saw a video right before it went down where like a maintenance light was on in a certain location that revealed maybe a little bit too much and so forth. So it's like they were having some issues. I think maybe stuff that they saw maybe prompted this, in addition to maybe the timeline associated with Fantasmic and so forth. It was like, okay, let's get down right now, have ample time to do this. And then and do all that. Also, too, we didn't really mention it, but the diseased trees out front, the fig trees, the trees as part of that queue, where that kind of cut-in is, and so forth. I think they also had, maybe they were worried about, hey, if a branch falls on somebody, that's gonna obviously be bad, and you don't want that. So I think it's kind of a lot of things mixed in there to take it down, but it's one of those left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing kind of thing.
Yeah, and I know you have to kind of pick and choose your battles, but I did enjoy seeing those trees because they were so unique to the land, especially the way that they would brush up against the building itself. And it's like, it brings you back to that New Orleans type of down in Louisiana bayou type of feel. And it just, you knew when you entered the land, you were in that land, especially when you walk in back with all the shops. Like you're completely cut off from the rest of the park.
You are. And it's to fill our viewers in with a little bit of history on why that might be. There's a pretty good story with, I believe it was Jack Rather of the Disneyland Hotel, right? Obviously, Walt, when he was building Disneyland, he needed a hotel or a motel or something to help accommodate his guests who would be coming down to see Disneyland. And he called up his friends in Hollywood, and nobody would invest in him, but Jack Rather would actually listen to him. He says, hey, come on down here. I have a proposition for you. Shows him the park as it's being constructed and says, hey, look, I need a motel. I need a hotel. Jack Rather was already getting into kind of land development deals. He was already getting into, buildings, architecture, oil holdings and stuff like that. Walt knew that if there was a guy I know that could do this, it's Jack, And so he like pleads with him, hey, look, can we please get something? And it's like, I don't know, Walt. I don't think this is going to work out. This is a risky operation, and at the time it was. And Walt, to convince him, he's like, okay, look, I will give you exclusive rights to the Disney name for 99 years, and that property is wholly owned by you. I don't want anything to do with it. Just kind of help his friend out and kind of sweeten the deal and make it happen. And Jack Rather eventually relents, and he goes and he builds the Disneyland Motel, which becomes the Disneyland Hotel after a couple of years, and Jack Rather's thinking about expanding quite a bit with 3 huge towers, the towers that are there right now, right, as we associate the Disneyland Hotel with. And as part of this construction, I mean, he goes to Walt and says, "Hey, look, I'm thinking about building these towers. I know that you don't want us to creep in on the kind of the atmosphere of Disneyland, right? You don't want to see these towers from within the park. Is there some way we can facilitate this?" And Walt was like, "Yeah, I think we can." And part of New Orleans Square construction, and the reason it was made the way it was in certain aspects, was to actually cover those towers so that you don't see them from within the park. They did some height tests and so forth to figure that all out. And that's why in certain areas of New Orleans Square, you do feel super immersed in a way that, other lands don't really approach. I mean, it really is, you're lost in this kind of famous Louisiana port city. And it's a really great effect. It's a really great, story attached to it to make that kind of happen. And it's kind of one of those wonderful, charming stories of Disneyland that it's, like I said, folks, it's this is where it's at, but to see so many walls.
Yeah, it is. It's like, it's so part of that rich history of not even just with Disneyland, but with Disney as a whole, as a company, as Walt himself. And I have to do a little plug-in for that with that story, folks, that if you want to see a little bit more of that story behind the Disneyland Hotel, you could check that out on Disney Plus for the Disneyland Hotel with the Behind the Attraction series.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you know what? I had not seen that. I think I might go watch that because that sounds very, very interesting. That's some pretty good stuff right there. I'm glad they did one on Disneyland Hotel. I know it's kind of an oddball, but when you look at the history of it, it doesn't become so odd. There's a reason they put it in there, folks. It has a history of its own, just like Disneyland does. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so. And then we're seeing like the changes to the Fantasmic kind of amphitheater there that we had talked about before. Some people are really concerned about that. I even was conversing with somebody on Twitter today about how it's like, they're the gentleman on there was saying, hey, they're reducing supply, they're reducing the amount of seating or viewing available so that they can sell it later at a higher price, and it's unfortunate that people are becoming, jaded and cynical enough based on the company's, recent prior actions, that they would even say that. But the harsh reality is some people feel that that's what they're doing. And I will say, I think they are kind of, monetizing things out, right? I think the plan is to monetize these viewing areas in a way that maybe we've never seen before. I think my theory is that Pelican's Landing is involved in that. Mm-hmm. The reason it was built the way it was and so forth was to facilitate those kind of premium deluxe viewing experiences, right? But I will say I don't quite think that's the case. With the previous terrace, I had explained this before, but maybe I should explain it again because maybe I wasn't precise in how I worded it before. But if you see the kind of viewing area for Fantasmic, you see that it's kind of like a bowl amphitheater shape, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of, Cafe Orleans is kind of a few more feet above sea level than the very river's edge, right? So it kind of slopes down and kind of contorts out. Well, there were these terraced platforms at various locations to attempt to provide more viewing area for the Fantasmic show. But these terraced platforms were flat. They were level. They were, they were not conformed to this kind of design. And because of that, although people on the front of those terrace platforms got a great view, maybe people behind them didn't because it was flat. And I think the idea of what they're doing right now is to get rid of those terraced platforms that can be kind of a hazard to traverse in the day, but also maybe smooth it out with the grade that naturally exists as it kind of flows down, as it kind of swoops down, so to speak, right? And kind of match that. And what that would provide, if I'm looking at it correctly, is maybe people behind those former people would have a good view, just as the people in the front would have a good view, because you're kind of raised with the grade as you go along. So I think that's what's happening. But what do you think, George? Am I correct on that? Did I explain that correctly?
Yes, you did. And I think it's really needed, because you do see at times a lot of frustrating guests that when they head over to that area ready for the Phantasmic showtime, you have sort of like, as you said, like a one level platform where it's either you're right in front, or you may have someone standing really tall in front of you and you can't see beyond them. So I do think it is needed. And I think this is where sort of kind of the double standard is between Disney and the guests. It's that the guests want more. They want a better experience. So this is Disney delivering on that better experience. However, because of some other issues within the park operations, such as with the reservation systems to the parks, the dining reservations, that it creates this tension with the guests that it's like, okay, we get that you're doing this for us, but what are you going to replace it with in the meantime? And in the meantime, you're not delivering. So it's like the double-edged sword on that notion. And and I get it. Sometimes you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You can't win all the time.
Sure.
But I do feel that I feel that if Disney were to have a little bit more restraint on how many people are in the parks, how many people are eating at restaurants at what time, but letting go of those reins a little bit, just a tiny smidge, that I think it would make all the difference. Because a walk-up, that phrase isn't even in Disney's dictionary anymore. I remember when you can literally go up to a restaurant and say, hey, I'd like to have lunch at 1:30 at 50's Primetime Cafe. Okay, oh, we don't have a 1:30, but we have a 1:45. Does that work for you? Absolutely. Put us in for one. That doesn't exist anymore.
Unheard of today at Walt Disney World. Unheard of. I mean, you would never encounter a day at Walt Disney World where you have a sit down restaurant and be able to get walk up service. It's just unthinkable. And previously that did exist for Disneyland for a period of time, but now they've kind of gone to the Walt Disney World route, and it's kind of it's not the best experience for anybody. It's not the best experience even for the people making that reservation, because they have to stay up 4 in the morning to do it.
And I do feel bad for the people who may not know what they're missing, because if you have a first timer going to Disneyland for the first time, and they just so happen, out of the luck of the draw, get a reservation for the Blue Bayou, and it's like, okay, oh, cool, well, we're eating at the Blue Bayou, not really think nothing of it. Little do they know of the immaculate view that they were supposed to have that would combine the intertwining workings of a restaurant and an attraction. Yeah. But then when they go in, they get this.
That's it exactly. That's it exactly. It's what was previously unacceptable before has now become acceptable now, because it's, like you said, the company just can't help itself sometimes. It just can't hold itself back. It's like we got to push it to the edge, How much capacity do we have? Okay, we have to saturate it, It's like, oh no, hey, hold back a little bit for walk-ups. Hold back a little bit for the experience of guests that are there throughout the day who are looking for a place to eat. No, we got to do it. And it's really unfortunate, because it didn't always used to be like this. It did, you used to have a company that would strain itself a little bit. I understand, over the years, people do get jaded, they get cynical, right? It's like, greedy Disney, whatever, they're going to push it. But previously, the philosophy guys, and I know a lot of people aren't going to believe me, but this was literally a kind of a philosophy in terms of park operation before. It was, okay, we know we're greedy, but we just don't want to come off as nakedly greedy. It was, yes, we're expensive. We offer a premium product, as they'll say, but in reality, as it worked before, it was, let's not completely rip people off, kind of thing, right? And now, that's just not part of the vernacular. That's just not part of the philosophy. And unfortunately, in some of these instances, we're seeing it. Go ahead and put that image back on the screen. Just one more time. I know people have stared at it, but you can see, even though there's no reservations available for Blue Bayou at all. I mean, I'm sure if you were to have gone to the park today and seen this view, it would have told you that no reservations were available if you try to book them, right? But you can see clearly empty tables. And this was something I brought up. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think now that, especially for diehard Disney guests, know now what is entailed? Do you think that would open up reservations because nobody actually wants to go while the ride is not operational?
It's absolutely possible. But if they know in advance, and I don't think a lot of guests do. I think a lot of guests are tuned out to the daily operations of Disneyland and may not know until they get there. So I will agree with you. That might happen. In terms of the percentages, I gotta believe that 90% of the people coming here do not know that this is part of.
And I think that's probably why that they don't put in that disclaimer.
Oh,
because
yeah,
they know what would happen.
Oh, absolutely, sure. But you see empty tables here, and yes, one can point to the fact that there are walls there, and maybe people dropped out, and maybe they couldn't saturate the restaurant to its maximum extent as a result of that. But honestly, what I'm hearing internally, what I'm hearing from guests on the ground, from cast members, what they're saying is that cast is still a problem at the Disneyland Resort. They cannot get enough bartenders and servers to maximize the capacity of these experiences, like the Blue Bayou, like Cafe Orleans, like the Cove Bar. The Cove Bar, what's interesting about that is, earlier, I believe it was maybe the last week or the week before, it was closed for like days at a time because they didn't have bartenders and restaurant staff to actually facilitate it. I mean, that's how dire this kind of situation is. And when you speak to waitresses or bartenders, at maybe the Tiki Room, the Trader Sam's, right, or Cafe Orleans or Blue Bayou, they'll say that service has been slow because they've had to restrict how many people can actually make reservations in accordance with their staff. And even though that staff might be capable of facilitating more tables and more drink service, they can't because ops is setting those numbers low in order to try to ensure a better experience. But it's
and not to step on anybody's toes or try to be a little careful of how I put this, but do you feel that this could be issues still connected with from the Pandy and the shutdown, and do you also feel that this could actually potentially be because of what's going on internally in the company itself right now with cast members?
Oh boy. Obviously this still has residual effects from the events of 2020, right? I think it would be, when they had that big cast member purge and
they had two. They had two like separate where they furloughed how many cast members, and then they did another wave.
Right. Well, also too, let's not, I know we haven't really mentioned it on the show, but remember there is also a vaccination mandate. Now, people have their thoughts on vaccination. That's fine. I'm not going to get into them here, obviously, but there are some people. But
that could potentially play into that sequence of why there's not as many cast members as we're used to seeing in the parks.
Exactly. And that might speak to, maybe cast members, early retiring as a result. And this does affect operations because there are, in the polling suggests in average American, like 20% of people might not get the vaccine for one reason or another. And if you're going to have that mandate, that might affect casting levels. And so you've got kind of waves of these kind of purges and let's not forget too that people who cast members who are actually working at the parks, because they're short staffed, more of the load, and yield management, of course, but more of the load is going to have to be placed on the people who are actually working that day. Right, I think we've all kind of experienced this in our daily lives as these part of these residual effects of 2020. That when somebody doesn't show up to work, you got to take that. You got to make up for that loss of output. And so cast members are getting burnt out as a result of that, because that happens over and over and over again. It's, I'm sorry for the show to be so negative. I usually want it to be positive and interesting, but
it's more so. And here's the thing, though. But it's a lot of information that needs to be put out there, because again, for anyone who would watch this show and may consider, wanting to book a reservation at the Blue Bayou, now they know what they're faced up against and not get the shock of their life once they walk into that restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah, I think nobody's talking about this, and that's why I wanted to bring it up with the kind folk at home, because I think a lot of people are being blindsided when they go, and the fact that Disney believes that this is acceptable, it just kind of, man, it just kind of rubs you as a guest the wrong way. I suppose is the easiest way to go about it. Look. There are better days ahead, right? We're looking forward. Like George pointed out, even at the Walt Disney World front, you have the 28th, I believe, is when that. They
call it something. It's some sort of meeting. Like it's not a meeting, but it's a
media like event or PR.
Yeah, like a conference event type of thing, where they're supposed to announce heavily on. With Guardians of the Galaxy, Cosmic Rewind, and Phantasmic returning. And that's why I was curious to see that if they was to mention anything of Disneyland, because I've noticed a lot of things too with both resorts that kind of also brought to my attention. I'm glad on this topic, because I wanted to ask you and get your opinion.
Oh, sure.
And my first part of the question is, did they announce when Pirates of the Caribbean was going to reopen?
They have not.
Okay. Here's my bigger question, because I'm starting to see a pattern with Disney where they're making sudden closures for refurbishments, but not giving a return date. And I've noticed
that's interesting.
I've noticed that with Blizzard Beach at Walt Disney World, they still have not announced a reopening date for that. I've noticed that with Expedition Everest, that the date got pushed back again at Animal Kingdom, and now I'm seeing this with Pirates of the Caribbean, where they do this sudden closure of refurbishment, but not a return date. And I'm curious to know what your thought process is on that, because Disney is not usually one where they say, because when they're expecting a lot of guests coming, especially with summer coming, but they're not giving a specific date, because people will book their vacations and their trips and their days at these parks when these certain attractions are open. And when they don't give a return time, does that mean that Disney doesn't even really know, because of the problem that they're facing of how long it's actually going to take?
I think it's a number of things, right? So I think Disney, like you said, George, I think they want to avoid people postponing their vacations, past refurbishment dates and stuff like that. But I think it's a kind of a minor issue, because we've seen reservations fill up kind of no matter what. So maybe that plays into effect, maybe it doesn't. Could be budgetary, where maybe if you don't have a set date that things had to go live as part of this kind of arbitrary reservation calendar, right? You can kind of stretch these things out and not have to play the crunch game at the very end, and I'm sure that's expensive, right? But I think moreover, like the biggest reason probably is probably contractors. It's probably getting people on a consistent enough basis to do these kind of long form refurbishments that we're seeing, and not really knowing if they're going to have contractors available, or if schedules are going to be clear enough in order to facilitate these rehabs. I think that might be playing something, have something to do with it too. Now, these effects will normalize that, I'm guessing. But for right now, with how fluid everything is, with the the economies, the markets, when you're talking about building, when you're talking about mechanical or engineering work, you have to, some of those things have to take a little bit more spotlight than they normally would, and that I think that has the biggest, that's going to be playing the biggest impact when it comes to these kind of open dates, so to speak.
Okay, yeah, I was curious about that, because I've noticed a pattern with that, not just at Walt Disney World or just Disneyland. I'm noticing that at both resorts,
I didn't even think about it. And you're exactly right, because Finding Nemo Submarine Voyage, right? That was a big one that, hey, winter of 2021. Oh, did we say winter? We mean spring. Now we have no date at all. We took those walls down, those signs down. Tarzan's Treehouse, it just went down, and it's been down for like 6 months. It went down in September, and it hasn't come back up. And it's like...
And it's a treehouse. There's like no... It's like...
Yeah, I know. I
don't know.
I know. It's kind of crazy. Now, Tarzan's Treehouse might be unique in that they might be maybe adjusting the kind of maybe the layout of the kind of bottom area, the base area, in order to maybe facilitate smoother traffic flow with New Orleans Square. That might play a piece in that, and that might explain why these things are being dragged out in the way they are. But, I mean, maybe Tarzan's Treehouse needed more rehab than they thought, And that's kind of an interesting thing, too. We talked about those fig trees, and I was having this conversation with somebody, like, you almost think when the parks were shut down for, and in the case of Disneyland for so long, for over 400 days, right? That
should be a crime.
I know. Well, I mean... Some people did consider it. And
it almost was.
It almost was, right? With the recall there. Okay. It's a whole other story. But but no, I mean, look. When those parks went down the way they did, it's the company losing revenue streams overseas. They're losing the revenue streams in the parks themselves, right? Theaters are closing up. I mean, honestly, a lot of these previous ways of that the Disney company would make money are just vanished out of thin air, just gone. And so the prospect of closing Disneyland, I mean, I don't think anybody knew how long it was going to be. They said 2 weeks. There's no way that ops believed that. There's no way. I was saying at the time, I was like, there's no way they're going to be open in 2 weeks. There's just no way. That's just not a thing. And sure enough, in the case of Disney, it was 400 days, right? But back in the day, when that happened, it's like, I mean, is it going to be down for weeks? Is it going to be down for months? We have a full staff here. Let's just do like, kind of a light storage, right? Because we might be back online sooner than we expect, right? And so that bulk of the horticultural and maintenance staff, they go home and they never come back. And there's really never an opportunity to kind of go back in and really long-term storage these different facilities, these different areas, and take care of like the plants and trees, for example, right? That would be an ongoing thing if the park was open, and when it's closed and you don't have the staff because maybe you laid them off, or maybe you can't hire them at that time because your cash flow problems are such in dire straits. We have to remember that they just acquired Fox. They have outstanding debt up the wazoo. The revenue streams are gone. They have significant liquidity issues that they have to contend with, and it's like, is it in the budget to go back and kind of maintain the Disneyland Resort as it's closed, and it just gets lost in the shovel? And you think about those trees and you think, man, would those trees have been diseased had horticultural staff been on it, been doing their work, right?
Yeah.
Would Tarzan's Treehouse be in the state that it's in right now had that been maintained more consistently? And to get back to our original thing when we started this video, I think the reason why we're seeing so much rehab is because these things would normally be done over the last 2 years, right? These things may have been budgeted, may have been developed, may have been worked out, but had to be put on hold, obviously. And now as we're starting to come back, as budgets are starting to get approved again, now it's like, it's not only do we have to take care of this year's maintenance, right? Because every single year you have a maintenance budget and you have to go over certain attractions, and they're scheduled out years in advance. And it's like, okay, we lost out on 2020. We really couldn't do anything in 2021 because we're just trying to get back online. And now it's 2022. So we have to make up for that lost time and also facilitate 2022's refurbishments. And I think that's what we're seeing. That's why we're seeing just all these refurbishments all at once. But at the same time, it's like, Disneyland used to have preventative maintenance, and now we're seeing them kind of rehab, and
And it's a shame.
it's just,
It really is. It's a pity
yeah.
because you don't want to see these parks suffer for it, and I guess again it's playing catch up, it really is. And it's
With everything.
yeah, literally. And me personally, if they have Tarzan's Treehouse done, and I know that they're not going to do this, but this is like completely totally off topic, but in my opinion, I always felt that the Swiss Family Treehouse would fit better in Disneyland and Tarzan's Treehouse fit better in Disney World. Like I just never really could see
That's
the
interesting.
correlation of having Tarzan's Treehouse and then you move right into New Orleans Square. Like it just seems like it has that classic Walt Disney touch that I would feel like coming off of New Orleans Square, you would have the Swiss Family Treehouse as opposed to Tarzan. I don't know why.
Well, do you know the story of Tarzan's Treehouse?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I can fill you in if you were fill in our viewers who might not know this story. But Tarzan's Treehouse was originally Swiss Family Robinson's treehouse. That was how it was constructed back in I believe it was 60s. I want to say 61, 62, something like that. And there's a great story of Slewfoot Sue from the Golden Horseshoe Review, how Walt was trying to figure out the kind of distance for the various stairs as part of that attraction, and I guess he asked her like, hey, come on over here. I need you to get in high heels and walk this and make sure that it's all okay, And that's just kind of how it worked back then. It was pretty fun, pretty great. But anyway, Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse was there. Paul Pressler era comes along. And if you know anything about the Paul Pressler era, it was
that I do know very well. Unfortunately,
yeah. I mean, it's the people talk about shape. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I can assure you, Paul Pressler much
Paul
worse.
Pressler would be like, "Hold my beer."
Exactly right. I mean, this guy was bad, and a lot of established practices that were taken on as part of the Disney Resort after this era came from some of the executive decisions that were a part of this.
I basically call that the pressured Pressler era.
Right. And his idea was cut costs, cut maintenance, and he had a philosophy. If it was good enough for Six Flags, it's good enough for us. Literally, he said that at a corporate event. It was crazy. Anyway, his idea was, you know what? We don't even need a treehouse anymore. No reason to have it. It's walk through. Obviously, it doesn't. You can't facilitate disabled guests as part of that attraction, right? So there's no way for a wheelchair guest to experience that attraction because of how it's laid out and everything. It's from a bygone era. We can just get rid of it. And Tony Baxter just put his foot in the ground and said, "Hey, look, you get rid of this stuff, you ain't never getting it back. And this is part of the history, the lifeblood of this park. You can't do this." And so, as a compromise to keep it there, because I think Paul Pressler wanted to make it another retail location or some other fruit stand or whatever. I mean,
we don't have
enough how his mind
those.
worked. Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, and the operational issues that came from that kind of mentality. I can go on an hour rant about it, but I will spare you guys. Anyway, as a compromise, it was, okay, look, we have this new movie, Tarzan, that either came out or was coming out, it did decent numbers. It was the end of the Renaissance era. But it was kind of good enough. It was like, hey, let's just redo it and redo Swiss Family Robinson's Treehouse in Tarzan, in kind of the form of Tarzan, to keep it around. And it kind of adjusted. That's where you get the kind of the bridge and the kind of entrance in the middle of that pathway that you see there. And that was all part of Tarzan's Treehouse, but it was all an effort to save it, to keep it around. So I do agree with you. Now that you say it, it probably would have worked better in Walt Disney World, but Disneyland, that was the one on the chopping block, and that's why we got it.
And I have to say, I mean, I don't really go to either treehouse when I'm at the resort. It's just not my cup of tea.
Right.
But I do like the setting place of where it's at, especially at Disneyland, where you're leaving Adventureland and going into New Orleans Square. I think it is. So the fact that they really didn't have a choice back then, as you had explained in that story, that if we had to just make it something just to keep it, then I would definitely appreciate just having something there than nothing.
Yeah, and that kind of mentality, people talk about hey, we lost Country Bear Jamboree, we lost the original submarine voyage and all that kind of stuff. But it was all, it was all these compromises that had to be made. It was all these kind of things where it was like, hey, we better imbue this with the franchise to keep it around because they want to get rid of it, kind of thing. And that's why the things happened the way they did. I will say Tarzan's Treehouse, I agree with you. I don't really go up it all that much, but if you get to the top of that thing, there are some stunning views of the west side of Disneyland that can only be claimed.
I did do each treehouse once. I did do each treehouse once just to
cool.
say that I did the experience, just to see like the difference of it. And I do agree with you. Once you reach to the top of that treehouse and you have a moment just to stand there and just get that eye view of everything down below you, it's breathtaking. Yeah.
And it's kind of cool to hear the drums and to hear the soundtrack as you're walking past it. It's kind of it offers a little bit more ambiance, and it's whether you're going into Adventureland or coming out of it to go into New Orleans Square proper. It's kind of that demarcation point. It's nice. It's it's I'd rather have it than not, kind of thing. I'd rather. Because we did lose a lot, Fort Wilderness and stuff. It's nice to have those kind of little areas that maybe don't make sense operationally, but for the guests, it actually does add. So yeah, look, George, I want to thank you for coming on. I thought this was a really kind of cool conversation, a really robust conversation, one I've been wanting to have for a while. There was something, too. I'm kind of teasing this. I'm going to tease it with you, too. I think I have a theory that they're doing all this to Pirates of the Caribbean specifically, part of the, this whole New Orleans Square kind of redo, and they said they were going to add some line space for Pirates of the Caribbean as part of this redo and so forth. I think a lot of the reason why they're doing this is to add Genie Plus to Pirates of the Caribbean. What do you think?
You know what? That did cross my mind. I kind of
don't share your thoughts yet. Don't share your thoughts yet.
Okay.
We're going to tease it. But initial thoughts. What do you think?
That's probably the biggest tease because it did cross my mind.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if we're going to tease it, I'm going to leave it at there, folks.
Okay. All right. I want to have this conversation with, when we get OG on and the band back together again, so to speak, and go into it, because I think it's a very fascinating conversation that leads to, one realm to another. So, ladies and gentlemen at home, you can look forward to that. Now, I just want to thank George for coming on. I mean, it was really, really cool to do this and to have you on in this moment. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this. Why don't you go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you?
Absolutely. And again, thank you, Mr. Freshly Squeezed, for having me on. It's always great discussing all this with you and OG and being part of his channel and doing him proud. And it's just, I'm very humbled to say that I'm glad the three of us have created something that I think, honestly, not even Disney can withhold in their own standards. So
see. There you go. You see, that Disney Parks podcast is coming, but we'll still be here with you guys.
Yes.
With you guys here. But
Absolutely.
George, we can find you on Twitter. Is that right?
Yes, you can find me on YouTube on DisneyFamilyMan23, also on Twitter at DisneyGeorge, and I mentioned before on Mr. Orange Grove 55's channel with Citrus Corner.
Awesome. And folks at home, if you have any, if you have any comments about this, what are your thoughts about all this? Are we off base? Are we too negative? We don't mean to be negative, but there are operational realities that we have to contend with, right? If we are, if you have any criticisms, if you have any comments, go ahead and put them in the chat down below. We'd love to hear from you. Honestly, it's really, really encouraging. And subscribe if you haven't done it already to get maybe more information about Genie Plus Pirates of the Caribbean. Is this a scoop? I don't know. You want to hear about it, folks. I think it's going to be really, really good. Anyway, I think that about wraps us up. So, on Freshly Squeezed here.
But really nothing compares with a freshly squeezed.
We will see you guys later. Bye-bye now.
See you later.